Today we continue on with our NHL season previews through the Metro Division, and we're taking a look at the Philadelphia Flyers for the upcoming 22-23 season. They've already been dealt some pretty significant information that's going to impact their season. Can they climb out of the basement? Can the new coach help? We'll discuss what to expect coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're taking a look at the Philadelphia Flyers and doing their season preview for the upcoming 22-23 season. Of course, if you're new to this series, we're going to quickly recap the 21-22 season, take a look at how things went, take a look at a few key team metrics, recent playoff history, take a look at the coach, GM, see what changes they've made in that regard, and then we're going to take a look at how the team has changed, key additions, key subtractions, any prospects that might be able to jump into this lineup and have an impact, and then we're going to take a look at what we expect to see on the ice in the opening part of the season as their projected lineup, and then take a look and talk about how we feel they're going to do. So let's first recap the 21-22 season for Philadelphia. As we know, it was a bit of a disaster last year. They were 8th in the Metro. They had a record of 25, 46, and 11 for 61 points. That's certainly not anywhere near what they expected. They only scored 211 goals, which was second last in the NHL. They had the dead last power play in the NHL, only 12.6%. So they were extremely challenged offensively on this team. Goals against, they allowed 298, which is a lot as well. That's 27th best, so only 5 teams worse. The PK wasn't too great either, 75.7% for 26th best. So overall, this team really had a lot of struggles last year. I mean, they ended up firing their head coach partway through the season. They had an interim head coach, and now we have a new head coach in John Tortorella, which to me was a little bit surprised when they went that route. I'm not surprised Torts want to coach again. And in a lot of ways, if you look at the historical significance of this franchise and Philly as a whole, I can see there being a Tortorella Flyer match, but just not necessarily where the team is at right now. Because to me, this team is a long ways from being super competitive and being a regular playoff team or competing for a cup. And I would have thought at this stage of Tortorella's career that would be something he's more interested in, would be with a more senior team that's maybe close and they feel like he might be the missing ingredient to help kind of get them over the top. But that's really not what he's stepping into here at all. Of course, general manager is Chuck Fletcher. He's been there since 2018. I have to think he's on the hot seat. He's made a couple of coaching changes. Obviously, that's you only get so many of those as a GM. Made some changes within the lineup. The salary cap's not in a great spot. I have to think if they get off to a terrible start, which wouldn't shock me, that they very well, Fletcher might have his job in danger. It's hard to say, but at the same time, ownership might cut him some slack given what this team has gone through, which we'll talk about here momentarily. Recent playoff history, they've missed the past couple of playoffs, so they've been out for the last 2 years. They have made the playoffs 4 times, though, in the last 9 years, so they're kind of a lot of in and out situations, but they've only won 1 series since 2012, and we know that was a really good year for the Philadelphia Flyers, so it's been a long time in the last decade to only have 1 playoff series victory. A lot of inconsistencies with the Flyers. I know, like I said, in the last decade, you've had years where you think they're going to be near the top of the division. Other years you think they're going to be like in the middle, down the bottom. Like they're just all over the place. And I think this team has kind of needed a bit of a rebuild for some time, but they've really, bucked going down that road. So now let's take a look now at how the team has changed. We talked about the team stats, recent history, coaching change. How has the roster changed? Well, let's start first by looking at the key additions for players they've brought in. And unfortunately, this list is not very long. They acquired Tony DeAngelo, who was a restricted free agent defenseman with Carolina, needing a new deal, having a hard time coming to terms. So the Flyers were able to pick him up via trade from Carolina. So, of course, he will be, a nice addition back there in the blue line. Don't get me wrong. But Tony DeAngelo on his own is not going to do a ton. They also really, in my opinion, overpaid for Nick Delorier. They certainly identified that they wanted this team to be a little tougher and certainly want to be tougher to play against, tougher in terms of not getting pushed around, those types of things, and having a guy that's maybe not a little bit more of a deterrent, you could say, willing to drop the gloves. Nick Deslauriers checks all those boxes. I do like what he brings to the table. He can play a regular shift. Lots to like about Deslauriers. Don't get me wrong, I'm not disrespecting him as a player, but I do think it's fair to say that they paid a little bit too much and more term than probably what most teams were willing to do. They probably felt they needed to do that to get the player. I'm sure there was some competition in free agency, but I don't know. We'll have to see how that works out. They also have a couple of vets there on PTOs. They're not officially additions, but they will be additions for training camp, and that includes veteran Antoine Roussel and Artem Anisimov. So obviously, those players might have a shot at getting a contract if they perform well through training camp. Now, what are the key subtractions? Who left this team during the offseason? Again, not a whole lot. They obviously lost Oscar Lindblom, he moved on. They traded Martin Jones. Nate Thompson moves on as a free agent. And that's really about it. They're largely coming back the same. Now, of course, I do have an asterisk there with a couple of key omissions, but it's not because they're not part of the franchise. It's just because they're injured and nobody really knows when they're going to play again. And in the case of Ryan Ellis, it's possible, although not confirmed, that he may never play again. He only played 4 games last year. They said he's most likely going to miss all of this year. So when you miss the bulk of 2 years, the odds of coming back are pretty darn slim. Now, he's still young enough, and I don't know where things are at with him overall, but maybe there's a chance, but it's not looking good. He's got a lot of core muscle injuries, including a issue with his psoas muscle and some hip issues and adductor. So he's got a lot going on, and if he's had like a year to overcome that and hasn't had progress, that's not a good sign. There's also been some reports from local Philadelphia media that there's been a major conflict between he and the team medical staff on how to handle this, the treatment, etc. And that might be part of the issue as well. And of course, Sean Couturier, also on this injured list, missed a big chunk of last season with a back problem. Comes into camp, and now we were expecting him to be healthy. All reports were that he was healthy, and now we're hearing that he might have a herniated disc and is going to be out for probably at least 2 months, and it could be longer if it doesn't heal up without surgery, and that if he needs to have surgery, he's going to be out much longer, and he could end up missing all or a big chunk of this season as well. For Sean Couturier, who was expected to be the number 1 center, that's another substantial blow. When you don't have your top defenseman and your top center for that long, it's kind of hard to be, an overly competitive team. Now, in case of Couturier, we wondered, was this an injury that was suffered during his training? But the only thing I seen from the Flyers was that it wasn't a new thing. So, really, were those reports of him being healthy true? It's really difficult to say. We also kind of heard a lot about, at the end of last year, we heard reports in media, Chuck Fletcher in ownership, Dave Scott did press conference, talking about how this team was going to be very aggressive in the offseason. They were going to retool, somewhat like they did a few years back, expect them to be, active in free agency and trades, and they were kind of trying to make some changes with this team and kind of get back next year to being what they thought they were going to be last year and all that. We expected a team to be very, very active. They didn't accomplish a whole lot. They could have had Johnny Gaudreau. Johnny Gaudreau is a free agent, wanted to go to Philly, and couldn't because they just could not make him an offer because they had no space. They didn't prep or plan far enough ahead to have the space to offer him a deal. So that's obviously not good when you have a chance to get a player like that who wants to basically come home and play. Obviously he ended up pivoting and going to Columbus, but there's enough reports saying that the Flyers were always his first choice, and it just never worked out. They couldn't even really make a serious offer because they had to clear a lot of space, and the cost to do that was just way too much, and they couldn't do it. It's just that simple. So how they ever planned to do the things that they said they were going to do in that press conference, I don't know how they were going to even think they were going to accomplish it because it was not realistic at all. And now, listening to Chuck Fletcher on day 1 of training camp, says that there's a lot of holes in the lineup. They're gonna play the kids a lot, and it's kind of sounds to me like it's more of a rebuild all of a sudden. Now, really, like, they should have expected the Ellis news for some time. That really wasn't, I don't think, shocking or new to them. The Couturier news might have been a little bit more surprising and unfortunate for them. But still, like, you're not going to rebuild over one player. This is not like a big revelation. So it seems like they're doing a complete 180 here and going in a different direction. And I just don't understand or really know that the management team for the Flyers really have a vision and know what they want to do. It's really kind of mind-boggling. And this team, I fully expect to struggle hardcore this year. Now, do they have any prospects that can jump up and make a difference? And the answer is yes, they do. And it's kind of a make-or-break opportunity. Like Morgan Frost, not really a prospect anymore because he's old enough and got enough games, but certainly going to be a big year for him. But like Noah Cates, Bobby Brink, Tyson Forster, Wade Allison, Isaac Radcliffe, they're all going to be battling for spots. I think they all appear to have enough talent between what they've showed in junior or in the minors at the lower levels. So to me, that they do have some interesting prospects who will be able, like I said, be able to fight for some jobs due to injuries, or if they can outplay somebody. Like, it seems like it's completely open. They haven't other guys, like I said, they're not really prospects anymore either. Besides Frost, you got like Tippett, for example, who they got in the Giroux deal. That's going to be an opportunity that they're going to want him to succeed because they gave up a lot to get him, trading their captain at the deadline. Obviously, the Claude Giroux era ended last year as well. It's another key part of recapping last year and moving on. It was a big change for this team. So some of those young guys will have every opportunity. Even Felix Sandstrom very well could have an opportunity as a goalie prospect to back up Carter Hart. So we'll see how things go and how training camp goes, but certainly an opportunity there for them to step up. What should we expect as their projected lineup going into next year? Well, without Couturier, you're going to have Kevin Hayes likely be your number one center. I would suspect he's probably going to play between Farabee and Konechny, or possibly Farabee and Atkinson. Atkinson and Hayes certainly had might have more of a connection. I'll have to see how they want to do the lines. But either way, Konechny, Atkinson are going to be your top two right wingers. I would suspect JVR will probably be on the second line, left wing. And Frost and Hayes are going to probably be your top two centers, with Couturier not being there. So they may move the wingers around a little bit, but that likely is going to be your top six. I suspect your third line is going to have an opportunity to be maybe Lawton, Tippett, and Cates. I think Cates will probably have the better chance out of some of those young guys to win a roster spot early on. And then you'll probably see a fourth line of Delorier, McEwen, with Patrick Brown probably being the center. I suspect that's a pretty good chance in how things are going to play out, but it could be a little bit different for sure. On the blue line, of course, you're going to likely have Tony DeAngelo. I suspect will line up with Ivan Provorov. Obviously, they can both play on the power play as well. The Flyers did seem to like the pairing of Sanheim and Ristolainen, so I suspect they'll remain together. And I would think your third pair more likely will be Cam York and Justin Braun. Your goalies, of course, Carter Hart will be the starting goaltender. More than likely, Felix Sandstrom will win the right to be the backup. But obviously, like I said, a couple of questions going into this year. Can they improve? I mean, their special teams were garbage last year. They could not score to save their life. And now a lot of their top players that they were hoping would be back and healthy are not. So is this possible that this team can really get any better? And I have to say, I honestly don't think so. I mean, the only way they were going to be better this year was that you get those guys back and healthy, and then you make changes, adding in a couple of players that could really ignite this offense. I really thought they would be aggressive early in the offseason to make some room to go after a free agent or two like a Gaudreau. Never happened. I know there's been some people that feels this team needs a rebuild and has needed it for some time, and that maybe this might kind of force their hand a little bit and trigger them down to that. And I wouldn't entirely disagree with that. I do think that they could benefit from it as well. It's just based on what I've seen from the Flyers in the last decade. They've resisted hardcore when it's been apparent before that they maybe should go down that route. So they certainly want to try, probably because of pressure from ownership and obviously to make the fans happy, to remain competitive, but sometimes that fails and you just have no choice but to be patient and to go the route of a rebuild. Obviously, this team, like I said, you're going to really, you don't get Ellison Couturier back. All you add is DeAngelo and Delorier. You take away Oscar Lindblom, Martin Jones. You're really not much better off. Now, John Tortorella, completely different coach. I know he's working them hard in training camp. He'll make sure they're in good shape. He's going to make their life tough, and he will not be afraid to be tough, make tough decisions, and give them some hard truths. We know how Torts likes to coach. If you've been following this game for some time, you know that. And you know that as a coach, that's, he's very fiery and not afraid to be. That's why I said in a lot of ways, based on what you typically see out of Philadelphia, just the connection there, I do see a fit, and what the team and the fans like, and Tortorella's personality matching well. It's just, I wasn't sure we'd see Tortorella kind of, leading a team that might really kind of need a rebuild. But that's why I thought, especially with the hire of Tortorella, that's going to mean they're not going to go this route, right? They are going to be aggressive, like they said, and they're going to try to retool in the offseason and make some significant moves to overturn this roster a bit. And then we just didn't see it. Now, I'm not saying they didn't try. I'm sure they did, and it was tough. Prices were high, and it just never materialized. But as it is, I personally don't think the Philadelphia Flyers are really going to be any better of a team. I think Tortorella might be able to get more to this team than the guys that were leading it last year. The big question will be, though, honestly, can the young players take big steps? Can Carter Hart kind of really get in the zone and be more of an all-star quality goalie that he was in junior? Can Konechny bounce back and get back to, maybe fulfilling more of that offensive punch that we suspect? Can Morgan Frost take a big step this year? Can guys like Cates or Brink jump into the lineup, have a positive impact? Can the vets still have an impact like JVR and Hayes? Can Kim Atkinson, continue to score? Those are all big question marks, and it's just hard to say what the answers is. But there's just so many questions and not enough answers that I have to say I expect the Flyers to be either at or near the basement of the Metropolitan again this year. So let me know your thoughts on the Flyers season coming up. Down in the comments, we'll discuss further. Of course, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.